If my topic is, and this is my topic, what is a Jew? So I want to share with you a story, which I think is very, very worthwhile, and I think it gets at the heart of this dichotomy that I just presented to you. I mean, most of the people in this room are younger than I am, as I can tell from the fact that you have blacker beards than I do. So I think I'm the youngest person in the room at this particular juncture. So you all remember. You remember the late 80s, you remember the early 90s, you remember the fall of the Soviet Union, and you probably remember how you were expecting it to go back south. You couldn't believe that it would actually happen. And then it happened. It was one of the greatest miracles in the history of mankind. We witnessed it. I don't know if you remember, there was a very famous broadcast where George Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev and the third guy, remember him? Come on, Boris Yeltsin. Were on the radio at the same time. No, Reagan was already a rebuttal at this point. This is the 90s, it's not the 80s. They had the radio broadcast. They had a radio, these three men were on the radio at the same time, and everything was being simultaneously translated into English and to Russian. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. The only thing I remember from that broadcast was they asked each one of these three men if they believe in God. And Gorbachev said, with whatever was left of his Soviet pride, "Ya atheist." I am an atheist. And, well, I wonder what he believes today. Or what he believed then, that he'll say today, but that's another story. Anyway, so they had these broadcasts. So there was a regular feature on the radio that I listened to. I was, I think, newly married. I got married in the end of 89, 90. There was a man named Vladimir Posner, who was supposedly a Jew. I'm not sure he was Jewish, but he read Posner, yeah? My great-grandmother's name was also Posner. And Phil Donahue, you know the name, Phil, you probably know who Phil Donahue is. And they would do these programs together on American radio. I don't know if this happened on the Russian side. Vladimir Posner was born in New York. And in the 1950s, his parents went back to the promised land. They went to the utopia of Stalin. You understand? And he spoke English fluently. He was brought up in America. So he was Radio Moscow. He was radio for decades. He was the voice of the Soviet Union to America. You remember they had the propaganda. So he was the Russian propaganda. I've heard interviews of him more recently where he says, not a single thing I said back then I believed. Let me tell you, he sounded very convincing. For someone who didn't believe a word he was saying, I think, I don't believe him now, I believed him then. But Vladimir Posner, his father is a Jew for sure. I don't know if he was Jewish, but he considers himself a Jew. And they were talking. And the topic of Jew came up, which is like a bad topic, but it came up. And Mr. Posner says, what is a Jew? It's not a religion. I'm an atheist, I'm a Jew. It's not a culture. You have white Jews, and you have black Jews, you have Asian Jews, you have European Jews, you have American Jews, you have Eastern Jews, you have Western Jews. It's not a race. It's not a race. Why? There are all kinds of different Jews. And he went through every delineation. He went through every possible criteria by which you can fix the definition of Jew, and came up empty. And he said, so what's a Jew? It's not a race, it's not a religion, it's not a culture. So what is it? And I was young and into it. I'm still into it, but then I was into the politics also. And I remember screaming at my radio. I mean, he hit a home run. Why? Because he articulated everything the Chassidus says about a Yid that you can't explain what a Yid is. It's a neshama. He didn't draw the right conclusion, but he asked all the right questions. He didn't dot the I and cross the T. He didn't say, so being Jewish is transcendent. Being Jewish has an element that you can't make sense out of. Being Jewish is more than logic. But he led you to the water, because he argued against any definition